Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to today's HDI webinar, Get IT Done, Strategies for Supporting the Modern Workforce. Today's webinar is brought to you by LogMeIn. There's a link to their website right in the attachments folder on your BrightTalk window. And we thank LogMeIn for supporting the webinar program. You can connect with HDI on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and our members-only community site, HDI Connect. HDI is where service and support professionals belong, and we'd like to remind you not to miss the early bird pricing for the new Service Management World Conference, October 15th through 17th in Orlando, Florida. And there's a link right in the Attachments tab. I'm Roy Atkinson, HDI Senior Writer Analyst, and we have just a few housekeeping announcements before you begin. If you're experiencing any technical problems, please refresh your browser. You can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the webcast, and we'll answer them during the Q&A session toward the end. You can download the slides from today's presentation by opening the Attachments tab on your BrightTalk screen, and be sure to check out the links you'll find there. There will be audience polls, and you can respond to the polls in the Vote tab under the presentation window. So you might want to locate that before we get started. Remember that today's webinar will be available on demand shortly after the completion of this live webcast, and you will receive an email reminder to let you know it's available. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. With me today is Peter Zanon, the Director of Products for LogMeIn Rescue, part of LogMeIn's Connected Products and Customers Business Unit. He's responsible for shaping the vision, product strategy, messaging, and overall direction for the Rescue brand, which focuses on providing technicians with elegant, reliable, cloud-based application for delivering world-class customer service and remote support. Prior to LogMeIn, Peter managed and designed various enterprise-level e-discovery products for Recomind Inc. And Peter received his MBA and his MS in Information Systems Management from Carnegie Mellon University. In his free time, Peter enjoys playing golf, and Peter, I hope you play better than I do, traveling and chasing his toddler daughter around the house. So right at the top, we would like to find out a little bit from you about your organization. Where does your organization stand in the adoption of self-help? So I'm going to put a poll out. So go to the Votes tab right away and let us know, does your organization currently have self-help as a support option? And you'll see some various selections there. Yes, you have self-help and it's very successful. Yes, but it's not doing as well as we would like. We had this in the past but couldn't get users to adopt it. Or no, we do not offer self-help, but customers can open tickets through web forms, so self-service. And no, we do not offer self-help. So let's see how you're doing with your self-help as a support channel. It's great and successful, maybe not so much. You had it and gave it up. You do not offer self-help, but self-service. And no, you don't offer it at all. Votes are coming in very nicely. Looks like a pretty interesting mix. We're going to leave it open for another 15 seconds or so. And we'll just get an idea of where you are. Remember, it's in the Vote tab by your BrightTalk window. Okay, we're going to stop the voting. And here's what we find. About 17% of you say you have very successful self-help. It's reducing support contacts. About almost 30% of you say yes, but it's not doing as well as we would like. 2% said you had it in the past but couldn't get users to adopt it. And about 30% say don't offer self-help, but you do offer self-service. Users can open tickets through a web form. 16% of you do not offer self-help at all. So kind of an interesting mix. But one of the issues in getting self-help to work properly is getting users to adopt it. So I'm not surprised at the percentage. It's about 15% on the final count were very successful. Okay? Thank you for voting, and we'll have another poll in a little bit. So the workload in support is increasing and has been increasing year over year for almost 10 years at least. And more than half of our support centers tell us that every year the ticket volume goes up. And we ask them why. And here are some of the reasons. More customers and users. Companies grow. Obviously, there are going to be more people and therefore probably more support tickets, right? If people on average contact support, say 1.5 or 2 times a month, the more people you have, the more support contacts you're going to get. New applications and systems, more technology. Everything depends on technology now, more or less. And so there's more technology in the organization to begin with, and therefore more work coming into support. New equipment and devices. So people might be a little unfamiliar with a new device, might need a little hand-holding or some tips and tricks or some tech support. And on the other hand, sometimes older devices breed tickets as well. Number of devices, there's more than 2 devices per person, right? Most people have at least a desktop or laptop and a smartphone. Some people a smartphone and a tablet and a laptop or desktop and perhaps peripherals. So at least 2 devices, if not more, per person. I think it's about 2.5 per person on average now. The number of applications. We have an application or an app for everything. And so people are spending huge amounts of their time flipping between applications, using applications for more things that they used to do in a different way. Usually a lot of new stuff is, of course, web-based, but just the sheer number of applications has gone up, and therefore people are running into issues, difficulties, complications, whatever. And the scope of services offered. Now, this is interesting, too. There's been a move in recent years toward more enterprise support and more enterprise service management, and therefore the scope of services offered by the support center, the service desk, might be larger than it was a few years ago, and that's one of the reasons our members tell us that their ticket volume has gone up, because they're supporting things that they didn't used to support. So those are all valid reasons why there's more work now than there was even a few years ago. So the total realm of technology that the support organization supports is increasing year over year over year. And not only that, but also technology is becoming more critical to the organization. Speed is of the essence. People don't want to have downtime of any kind. They don't want to be interrupted when they work. They want to be able to get things accomplished and get them accomplished speedily so that they can get on to the next thing. However, as we know, staff tends not to increase proportionally to the number of applications, the number of technical things that people are connecting, so forth and so on. So our staffs have remained more or less flat, a little bit of hiring, some backfilling, but not as much as a lot of us would like. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And that's kind of the gist of today's presentation, is how do you continue to take on more work and accomplish more when your staff is more or less fixed at the same level. There's several approaches. We're going to talk about some strategies for that. So here's one. Everybody talks about the fact that people want to be able to work anywhere and work anytime. People like to work in off hours. They do work on the weekends. They do work when they travel, and a lot of people are mobile. About 70% of the workforce is going to be mobile by 2020, according to some of the big analyst firms. And so it's a real challenge to try to provide off-hours support. And currently, 1/3 of support centers are not staffed in off hours, which is an extreme challenge. So then what happens? Somebody calls in or somebody contacts support. Somebody opens a ticket on a weekend and it doesn't get seen until Monday morning. Things might cascade. They didn't assess the priority correctly and realize that they should have called somebody and got on-call staff, whatever it happens to be. But there's a greater expectation of availability. People expect to get support where and when they need it. Increased need for knowledge management simply because of the complexity that we're facing in the technological environment. As I mentioned, more applications, more devices, more of everything pretty much. And so it's difficult for support staff to keep up and also for users to keep up. Increased emphasis on speed, right? Speed equals the competitive advantage. Get to market first, get things accomplished quicker, make sure people get back to work fast. All of those emphasis on speed are really important. And a greater need for collaboration. Collaboration is the antidote for complexity, right? People working together can tackle complexity better than people working individually, and therefore organizations perceive a greater need for collaboration, and a lot of organizations have increased the number or types of collaboration tools that they provide, which of course, again, increases the dependence on technology and the complexity of the support environment, right? More tools, more tech, more support. This is a never-ending cycle, it seems. So when the workload goes up and staffing remains the same, speed becomes important. So that's a duh moment. But let's say without increasing staff, you have to handle that increased workload. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can either increase the use of self-help, and therefore it's one of the reasons that we asked that poll at the beginning. And the second thing is to decrease the handle time or mean time to resolve. Get those times down, resolve the issues as fast as possible, and make sure that people get back to work rapidly. Speed is of the essence. Can't emphasize that enough. Self-help is, of course, as we know, not necessarily the fastest way for people to resolve their issues. They may have trouble finding things in your knowledge base. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But decreasing that time to resolve is exceedingly important. If somebody finds an issue or runs into a problem, they need to get it resolved as rapidly as possible. So that's one of the emphasis, reducing that time to resolve. So we know that escalations increase the mean time to resolve or mean time to repair, right? Level 1 handles something. They need to escalate it. Now it's gone into a group at a higher hierarchical level that may not be spending as much time directly supporting customers as level 1 is, or level 1.5, however it works in your organization. And so what happens is that ticket may sit for a day before anybody even looks at it because they're off doing other things that level 2 does, working on projects, planning for the future. So it tends to languish a little bit. You don't get a response back to level 1 so you can tell the customer it's resolved because there's other work going on. So to minimize escalations, you got to have better skills at level 1, and there's a couple of different ways to get that. Training obviously is important. Documentation is exceedingly important. If you're going to roll this stuff downhill or shift left, as we say in the industry, bring some of that work down from level 2 to level 1 or level 3 to level 2, whatever it happens to be. You need better documentation, better knowledge, and the best possible technology for user assistance. You got to make sure that when somebody needs some help, no matter where they are, no matter what they're using, no matter what device they've pulled out of their pocket or out of their briefcase, they have to be able to get that support, whether they're in the airport, the train station, at a remote client site, wherever they happen to be. And so it is really important to get the best technology in their hands that they possibly can have. Super important. So before we move on here, I'm going to push another poll out to you, and that is going to be about remote support, and then we're going to dive into remote support a little bit. So I'm going to start the voting on another poll in the Vote tab on your BrightTalk screen. Find that. And roughly how many of your support tickets are resolved using remote support? You don't have to know this exactly, just an educated guess, or maybe some of you are managers and do have the metrics top of mind. Less than 10% of your tickets, 11 to 25%, 25 to 50, more than 50%, and some of you obviously will not necessarily know what that number is. So educated guess on how many of your support tickets are resolved using remote support. And we'll let that run for a little bit more. And then we'll stop the voting and see what your responses look like. Okay, 10 seconds. And stop the voting. And let's see what it says. So less than 10% of you, 23% of you say less than 10% of your tickets, so less than a quarter. 22% said 11 to 25, 20% said 25 to 50, more than 50, 30%. That's actually the highest percentage. So around a third of you said more than 50% of your tickets are resolved using remote support. So that's how critical a technology that is, and here to talk more about that and some of the other things that we've talked about is Peter Zainu.
Thanks, Roy. A very interesting topic that we have today because it's one that I think is at the forefront of a lot of support managers and support agents, and it's really how do you become more productive with the resources that you have. In my opinion, one of the most cash-strapped or strangled organizations in a company always ends up being the support organization, whether that's customer care for external support or internal IT for a standard organization. It's always that group that never grows as fast as the technology at an organization is growing. So when you look at some of the statistics that Roy was just talking about, it's becoming a little problematic because we're either not going to be properly equipped to handle the requests that are coming into the help desk, or you're going to end up being not able to really react to what's going on with that business. But from my point of view, I think there's really three main tips on making that impact for productivity when it comes to really building your help desk out to handle some of the increased volume. The first one is really looking at your processes and building up the best process for your organization based on the people that you have, based on the number of resources that you have, based on a few different things. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of different processes that you can enable right now, whether it's swarm from a number of people that you're going to end up having in your help desk, whether it's a triage system that some people enable on having a tier 1 agent resolving basic issues or really identifying what the problem is, finding the right process that fits you. A lot of organizations that I've seen in the past, they either start small and really just scale that small mind thinking instead of actually adopting something that's going to better fit their organization, or they try different processes because it's maybe a new flavor of the month. At the end of the day, it's whatever fits your organization correctly, as opposed to whatever you think is really, in the top of the mind when it comes to the news. Another process that we've been seeing has really been pioneered by HDI, and that's the shift left concept. And I really find this to be very powerful in today's day and age. Like we talked a little bit about beforehand, self-service and self-help are really things that are starting to become pretty popular in today's day and age, but it's funny because it follows a trend that we've seen in the marketplace, and it's really that concept around I want to find the answer out myself. If you think about how our world lives right now, very rarely are you even at a bar or hanging out with friends and family, and an argument or a disagreement comes up on who started a movie or what was the date that the last time that a team won the World Series, that you don't just pick up your phone and start Googling what's going on. Then you resolve the issue and you move on. And it's really that trend as we look into the middle tier that is feeding into that shift left concept. We can embrace people trying to resolve different things by providing them different channels and how they can resolve it themselves. So taking that shift left process and really looking at how you can take advantage of some of those industry trends. And there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the industry right now as you look into that middle bubble right there. But a lot of it really revolves around utilizing new forces, new capabilities that are out there, and new ways of thinking that even people like millennials are starting to bring into the workplace. And that's things like different ways of communicating with the help desk, so using more of chat or text message or self-help type of portals, using more messaging applications, because that's how people want to communicate more asynchronously. But definitely embracing some of those tools, because integration with those technologies in different systems can really not only make you more efficient, but help you manage your workload and prioritize a little bit better, but also utilize those statistics to really argue for more resources and more help. And then finally, as technology is starting to increase, and even when you look at SaaS technology, there's more adoption in newer tools. You need to make sure that your different software suites or bundles or technologies really play well with other things that are in your help desk. I read a statistic the other day that said something of 60% of organizations in the small and medium businesses have at least a $20,000 a year bill that they pay for SaaS software, varying on 10 plus technologies. That's a lot of different systems that are there to really resolve a basic or a single need. You need to make sure that technology is really playing well with other technologies that you have. Does it link to your CRM system? Does it link to your self-help system? Does it enable your users to have a seamless experience, or is it just a point solution that's just there? If you solve all three of these or look at them in your organization and optimize for what's built for you, you really can make an impact on that productivity without actually having to add more resources or more capabilities.
Peter, I'm going to jump in here. There is one question that I would like to get out of the way before we get to the Q&A session. Somebody has asked, define remote support. And I think that it's a fairly simple definition from my perspective. I can understand why there might be some confusion about it, but from my perspective and the way we use it at HCI is remote support is supporting a customer without being at their desk side. So being at the help desk, using a remote support tool to connect to their computer, being able to make software changes, downloads, et cetera, that would be remote support. We're not talking about people working from home necessarily, but we are talking about the ability to support a customer without standing next to them or sitting next to them at their desk. Does that make sense to you, Peter?
That it definitely does, and it's one of those capabilities that's now becoming very standard in the help desk because of a few different things that are going on in the workplace. The increase of a number of technologies that are there, so more things that people have to handle, and that remote workforce that you were talking about, being able to treat them like they're an in-office employee, so supporting them the way that you would if somebody just walked up to your desk.
Right, and one final word on this particular topic, that last year in our annual technical support practice and salary report, we saw that for the first time, the support center has overtaken and passed desktop support for the use of remote technologies. So that's kind of a big switch. It was dead even the year before that. Last year, the support center is doing the predominant amount of remote support, so it's obviously being utilized very highly. Thanks, Peter.
So no worries. I wanted to, before we moved on to some of the Q&A, I wanted to talk a little bit about how some of my customers have found ways to really optimize and make an impact on productivity utilizing remote software or remote support software that LogMeIn provides. And the first one is really a great example. It's one that I really like because it's Make-A-Wish. Make-A-Wish is an organization that, for those of you who don't know, works with a lot of volunteers and really provides a last or a great wish to a child who's either has a terminal disease or has suffered from something that that was really detrimental on their lives and have come out survivors. So when you look at their organization, they're made up of thousands upon thousands of volunteers and hundreds of remote satellite offices. But even if you take just one office, you've got to onboard a lot of people very quickly and support them on different technologies and different capabilities on the fly. And there's a lot of volunteer, a lot of turnover that's there. Utilizing our remote support software, they've been able to reduce their handle time for requests and onboard users much faster, which really was impactful to us when we started working with them, because it showed that we were able to help them stop fighting technology and actually start granting more wishes to children. And at the end of the day, it's probably one of the best examples of use of my software that really epitomizes where we are. We don't want to fight. We don't want to have people fight with technology. We want them to get back to doing their job. And for Make-A-Wish, doing their job is really something that benefits society and really benefits children that suffered. And on another side, when you look at Baumer and Kirkland, they were an organization that were really in that environment that I was talking about before, where there were so many technologies that they were utilizing. They had different acquisitions, they had different mergers that were coming in, and so many different technologies that were there, and some that didn't play well with some of the other systems that they were using. So they were really going through a lot of effort to train people on a variety of different systems, a variety of different technologies that they really needed to consolidate quickly. So through the power of LogMeIn's remote support technologies, they were able to focus on one technology set and actually streamline the organization and grow it out in a much faster and better way, while handling exponentially more tickets and support issues that came on in. So as they were able to consolidate and to standardize, they were able to handle more and really do more with less. So a couple different examples of how you can utilize LogMeIn's technologies, but both great examples on really finding ways to optimize that productivity. And Roy, on that note, I'll turn it back on over to you to kind of to lead the Q&A.
Awesome. Yeah, we have some questions that are waiting to be answered here, and some of them will bear a little bit of discussion, so we'll spend some time on this. This is great. Is there any view on industry reference to self-help adoption by region? That's a very interesting question, and it's one that I haven't seen any particular research on, but I have seen discussions on this, because some cultures are less accepting of the idea of self-help than others are. So there might be differences by region, by global region. For example, and I don't know this to be a fact, but let's say that Latin America is less prone to use self-help than North America is, or Europe is less prone to self-help, whatever that might be. There are cultural differences, and that may play a role in how your users adopt self-help. So it's something to bear in mind. Your adoption rate may not be the same as somebody in a different area or a different culture, simply because of the way that people expect things to happen within that given culture. Have you seen any of that, Peter?
Yeah, we see a lot more adoption in North America when it comes to that type of self-help. We see a lot of SMSing in Asian countries and India, which you can utilize and work with self-help in certain ways, but it's definitely more difficult for user adoption out in those areas. But I think as we start adapting the technology and making it more responsive, if you will, I think people will start adopting it. Really, at the end of the day, most people I've seen is if they find a tool that allows them to answer their question, they're going to use that more often. But if they go to you and they can't figure it out right away, or they have a bad experience the first time, you've almost lost them for a little bit.
Right, and there was an interesting study by Gartner about 3 years ago, I think 3.5 years ago, And what that said was that IT was making some mistakes in terms of the construction of self-help. And one of the things that report talked about was the fact that IT spent time, spent effort, spent money setting up self-help. Users tried it and didn't come back, or they didn't try it, or whatever. And one of the biggest issues that they found when they looked at the organizations that had this happen was that people just didn't either understand the articles that they were reading, because it was written from an IT perspective, not from a user perspective. And then what tended to happen was that IT said, well, okay, it doesn't work, and they just abandoned it rather than try to improve it, which is unfortunate. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to add an article to the attachments tab, and that article is all about level 0 solvable. It's a very interesting approach to making sure that your self-help, your knowledge base, your customer-facing knowledge base is usable from the end user perspective, and it is wicked important for that to happen. So I'm going to add that article as rapidly as possible without breaking up the flow of the webinar here. It's an article written by a knowledge expert whose name is Rick Joslin, and he has written this. LZS is going to be the title of the attachment, Level 0 Solvable, and I'm going to put the link in the attachments even as we speak. It's just going to take me a second. Link to a web page, add, boom. Okay, sorry to be talking through this, but sometimes it's helpful. You probably do this at your desk too. a little behind the scenes. So there we go. Okay, I will add that link, but let's proceed with your questions so we don't get totally sidetracked. Level 0 solvable, and you can find that for yourself if you wish, by the way. Go to thinkhdI.com and just put LZS in the great magnifying glass search, and you will come up with that article if you care to do it that way. So here's how important is end-user training in minimizing tickets? That's a really good question, and I think that it depends on the complexity of your environment. So let's say you are in an environment where 90% of what people do is fairly straightforward. They use Word, they use Excel, they standard office productivity applications. Maybe they use a time tracking system. If it's at that level, we would expect that people would be competent enough to use those systems today, in today's world, right? We would expect that of the end users. However, if you're in an engineering environment, a scientific environment where things get really complex, and there are new tools coming into the environment all the time, end-user training can be way important in trying to minimizing workloads. That's my experience. Peter, do you have an idea on that question?
Training is probably one of the biggest reduction items for remotes, for any sort of ticketing or ticket increase. The problem that ends up happening is that the amount of technology that comes on in and the amount of time that users have is starting to become very disproportional. So you're introducing new technologies. Users, I see, just don't have the time to sit there and go through a training. So they kind of start winging it, and once they hit a roadblock, that's when they'll fill out a ticket and seek help. So it's not just the increased volume of training, but I've also seen how you train people. Do you do it in product? Is it something that is a progressive training process, or is it more of a sit down, do a 2-hour training and learn how to do it, and then hope you remember everything as you progress through? There are ways to reduce tickets through training, but like I said, it comes into a few different ways. You can't just rely just on training, but more on the quality of it.
Yeah, that's really important. And also very specific. If you're using proprietary technology in your organization, that's that should be your training focus. Stuff that your organization uses that people wouldn't know if they're coming in from another organization. And that kind of technology is really important to get trained on. So yes, training can help. Okay, next question. As part of the survey regarding remote support, was there any information about the percentage of adoption rate and satisfaction based on the application used? I don't know of any information on that specifically. What we reported on as far as remote support was the percentage of organizations that are using it to resolve issues. And of course, we have overall satisfaction numbers for those organizations. I believe last year was 86% of customers said that they were satisfied or very satisfied with their support center. But I don't have specific numbers based on an application. Peter, you might?
I know my applications, and I know the difference of handling a support call without remote support and handling a support call with remote support. The CSAT numbers for with remote support are significantly higher, upwards of, I've seen the delta be close to 30 points in some cases for CSAT being higher in that area. So we definitely see it as an increase, and we think from surveys that we've done in analysis is that LogMeIn has some of the higher rates for CSAT changes, but when it comes to remote support, it's definitely significantly higher.
And going back to the previous question on training, one of the things that I used to urge my people to do was when they were connected to a user's computer, depending on the user's wishes, because some people just want you to fix the issue and get out. That's all they want. Fix it and go by. Just go away. But other people are very willing to learn, so you can actually show them, and this is one of the ways that I found remote support very helpful for myself and my teams, was to show people step by step how you're doing what you do or how to avoid the issue that they ran into, perhaps by clicking the wrong thing or whatever they did that maybe froze their computer up or something like that. You can actually show them while you're connected, and that is an exceedingly good training tool because you're on the phone with them or you're in a chat window with them and you're showing them exactly what you're doing. They can see what happened, and it's also a good discovery tool for the support person because they can see how a series of steps might lead to an issue that your user ran into. So it's training in both directions. It's a really good way to learn. Okay, so another question. We are trying to deflect calls, but people seem to prefer calling and letting us do the work. That drives cost up. What's a viable solution? Deflecting calls, I flinch at the word deflect because it sounds like you're putting your hand up in front of the user and saying, don't call us. Manage your calls would be a much, or prevent calls, which would be the best of all possible worlds, right? Make sure you fix it so that it doesn't happen to anybody else or doesn't happen in the first place is the best way to go. But people sometimes do prefer calling, as I just mentioned. Sometimes when you're in a remote session with a person, they'll just say, just fix it. And some people take that approach. I'm going to call you, you're going to fix it for me, and that's it. The transaction is over, and that's all I care about. I'm able to work again, fine. But if you're using it to manage your calls, if you're using different ways to manage calls, and we'll talk probably a little bit more about some of those as we go through the questions. Some people are just going to prefer calling or connecting to a chat session and letting you do the work. They figure that's what you get paid for, right? Have you seen that as well, Peter?
Oh yeah, I mean the amount of people that I know that would just call on up and even in my organization just go to IT and go, okay, you know what? Your turn. You just take it. I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee. Hopefully you're done with it by the time I'm done with my coffee.
Exactly.
It's fascinating, but and then there's other people that want to just email and figure it out themselves and do it on their own time. So it's different strokes for different folks at that point.
Okay. Let's let's go on to the next question. We have self-help. How do we market it so people will adopt it? Again, I would urge you to read that LZS article, and I was unable to add it to the attachments. I'm sorry you can't add during the webinar. I'm afraid. I tried, and I was told by Bright Talks Technology, can't do it. So if you go to thinkhdi.com and type LZS into the search, you will find that article. Basically what it says is that if you capture all your support calls, you capture the way the customer talks about whatever it is they're trying to resolve. Get their language, even if it's not correct, even if it's not even close to how you would say it. Capture that and get that into a knowledge article about the thing they're trying to fix. Let's say they refer to email as messaging. That might be confusing for us IT folk because we think of messaging as being something different from email usually. We're thinking about instant messaging, but maybe that's the way they refer to it. And because of that, they've been searching on messaging in the knowledge base and coming up with the wrong answers for their problem because they're using a different terminology. So it's important to capture that customer's terminology, get it into the knowledge articles, no matter what it is. And once you get users able to find, once you get your staff, able to find the answers using the customer's exact terminology, 60% of the time, boom, you're ready for self-help. You can push that out and be very confident that people are going to really start finding the things that they're looking for. And that's an immense frustration to people. I find it myself if I run into a question on something that I'm using or something I've downloaded or something that I want to buy and I can't find the answer, no matter how hard I search, it's very frustrating, and I know that users get very frustrated with that, and they tend not to come back and not to try. Okay, here's another one. What are some good ways to get people to adopt self-help? It's a very big question and a very interesting question and a complex one. And other than what I've already said, I'd just like to add that maybe what you need to do is get your marketing department involved. They have ways to approach things that they can make it attractive to people. They know the right words to use. They know the right icons and logos to use. And they can make it attractive to your folks. Okay? Another question. Can you take a more granular vote of those who responded that did remote support, especially above the 50% point? 75, 95. Also, taking the same revote might be helpful now that remote support is more clearly defined. We have already populated the votes from audience. I would suggest that there is pretty good information out there available on the effectiveness of remote support. We try to get those votes as easy to take as possible and keep the selections as few as possible. So thanks for asking. How can we convince management that we need more staff? Whoa, there we go. That's a big fat question. And of course, from HDI's perspective, that basically says how much work have you got and how many people is it going to take to get that work accomplished. And so what it means in terms of how you figure that and make an argument for it is that you calculate the amount of time it's going to take to get through the volume that you have to get through. How do you measure? You measure by your ticket volume. That's the clearest way to measure the amount of work that you have. So if you have 1,000 tickets, let's say, in a year, I know that's ridiculously low, but still, if you have 1,000 tickets in a year and it takes 8 minutes on average to handle those, then you've got 8,000 minutes worth of work. Likewise, if you have 50,000 tickets and it takes 20 minutes each one, then you do the math and you figure out exactly how much work you have, and then you figure that based on excuse me, the amount of available work time that your staff has, and you have to take out things like for vacations, sick days, projects, lunches, breaks, all of that stuff that you have to take out, and you try to estimate how much work each person can do and how many people you need to get the work done. I don't know of a clearer way to describe it than that, or a better way to calculate it. There might be some very interesting ways that individual organizations have come up with. And of course, there's workforce management software out there. But without doing that to try to make an argument for increased staff, you got to figure out how much work there is and how many people it's going to take to get it done. If you can use that as the basis of a business case, you have a fair shot at convincing your management that you need more people. If you're coming up short and you have unhappy customers, if your abandon rate is high, if your satisfaction rate is low, if the wait time is 40 minutes on your phones, you're going to have irate customers. They're going to complain, and that's one thing that a lot of people don't think about encouraging it. Not necessarily that you want to have angry customers, but if you do have angry customers, say, here's what you can do. You can complain to the powers that be and let them know that it's frustrating to you and that you're being unproductive during this period of time that you're waiting on the phone. I can't think of a better way to express it than that. Peter, can you?
No. I believe if I had a better answer or a clean answer for this one, I could definitely sell that advice to a lot of people that I talk to. But most of it ends up being like what you were talking about. Show the workload, show the people that are needed for it, show the delta, and see if you get others that would buy into it and understand that the department is worth investing in. And I think there's a belief right now that IT is just in there, or help desk is just in that middle. They don't want to underinvest in it because it can become counterproductive, but overinvesting might be a little tough. But we want to show people that actual investment in the help desk is going to lead to more productivity and more benefits in the organization across the board.
Right, thank you. Just going back to the previous question on modifying the polls, just so you are aware of this, we cannot add or modify things while we're on the air. We can't do it. The software, BrightTalk software, does not allow us to do that. So as much as we might want to add an additional poll, we can't. Okay, so what on average should you expect for a support volume decrease due to a well-marketed self-help approach? I know of organizations that have had something like 20% decreases in their call volume specifically, but it's going to vary so much from organization to organization, depending again on the complexity of your environment and lots of factors involving your users. So I'm not sure that we could say that there would be an expectation of a specific percentage of change. You should see a decrease in support tickets being submitted to you if your self-help is being effective. That much we know because people aren't contacting you. They're finding their own results. But how much that's going to change depends a lot on volume, user capabilities, the robustness of your knowledge base, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Okay, does chat as a remote support channel generally reduce phone calls? Okay, so going back to the definition we did of remote support, I am not going to say that chat is remote support. Chat is a contact channel that allows you to contact support from a distance, but so is phone, so is every other thing, right? So I wouldn't say that's a remote support channel. By remote support, again, as Peter and I agreed earlier on, we mean the ability to provide support without going to the desk side, meaning you're connecting using a tool such as those provided by LogMeIn to connect to a user's computer and do some work there. Does chat generally reduce phone calls? The answer is yes, but I have some acquaintance with an organization in which there was a group within the organization that really wanted to have chat as a channel, and they lobbied support to add chat as a channel. And because this group said they wanted chat because they didn't have time to call, they were in meetings a lot, they couldn't pick up a phone in the meeting and call when they needed support, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the support organization did expect an increase in ticket volume, and they planned for about 10% increase when they put chat in place. And what they got was a 30% increase in support volume. So you might be tapping into an audience in your organization that has not been contacting you. Last year, I think the number or the percentage of people in your organization who ever contact support was about 64%, about two-thirds. The other people, either their environment is perfect or they're just not contacting you for whatever reason. Chat can help, and it certainly should take some of the burden off the phone calls, but it will not necessarily reduce call volume. It may, in fact, contact volume. It may, in fact, increase contact volume overall simply because people like to use it. Do you use chat? Do you like chat as a channel, Peter?
I love chat as a channel. I predominantly in my own personal life use chat and social as my way of communicating with other organizations. I don't know why. Maybe it's just me, but I believe a lot of people are using that now in that asynchronous communication more on social and what a lot of chat tools are building in. When it comes to something where I need to be hands-on, so like a remote support scenario, I actually prefer the phone for it. So I've seen a lot of escalate from chat to phone call when you need to get more in the weeds of resolving an issue. But from a communication platform, chat is one of my preferred methods.
Yeah, me too. I like it. And now with the advent, we shouldn't go away from this webinar today without mentioning some of the automated tools that are coming into play. And one of them is chatbots, of course. And I have had some very good experience with chatbots, basically doing that really, really first-level triage. For example, what are you contacting us about? Is it this, this, or this? Giving you a small number of options, and when you select one, it gets you right, connected to the right person or the right group to help you resolve it. A chatbot can be very useful for that. Especially, remember, going back to my portion of the presentation today, I talked about how only about a third of organizations have off-hour staffing for support. That can be one way in which chatbots can be very helpful. They can do that first-level triage. And if it's set up properly, it should be able to create a ticket based on what the person says. And it also should be able to differentiate between low priority stuff that can wait until Monday and high priority requests that need assistance now and will tell the person to call in or forward the information to somebody who's on call so they get immediate assistance. So chatbots can be very smart, and they're a great way to do that very basic triage. They'll get more sophisticated as time goes on, but right now don't expect them to do too much, and if they're misconfigured, they can be a real pain. Right? I've found that as well. Peter, how about you, since you use chat a lot?
Yeah, chatbots have become one of those love-hate type of things, because you're right on that sense of if it's not configured right, it could just be frustrating. It'd be like the the IVRs on phones, but if it is configured right and it's used in the right scenario, it can really make things so much easier and really guide the experience, whether it resolves the problem or not.
Great, thank you so much. So, Peter, do you have any closing thoughts on how we can address this issue of supporting more and more with maybe the same or maybe even less as we go along? You talked a little bit about how technologies can sometimes fight each other and not work together as properly as they should. What are some tips for looking at that as you look at adopting new technologies? Are there some flags that you look for?
I definitely look for a few different things. I look at how open some of the APIs are with the technology. I look at how many out-of-the-box integrations they have, because if you have even the right ones, maybe not so much on the volume, but you pick and choose the right ones that are there, you know that the organization is really thinking about the ecosystem and the workflow. You have to make it easy for people to use the technology, or else it's going to become a hindrance and you're going to be fighting with that as opposed to resolving issues. So finding an organization that has an integration flow, has a well thought out workflow, and really looks at the full ecosystem, not just their technology. That's what I look for in advancing everything. And it's funny because I think we've talked a lot about a few different things that you can do to work your way through, resolving more problems or being more productive with less. And it really, I think, boils down to those three key points that I was going through and that you hit on a little bit, Roy, as well. And that's optimize your processes, optimize your trends that you take advantage of and really see as your future, and then really optimize your technology and your software to make sure that everything plugs and plays together, whether from your IT technician side or from the end user side, but also make sure that it's very seamless and it's very plug and play.
And I think you hit on a theme there, Peter, that's really important for people to consider no matter which aspect of this we look at. Friction is your enemy, and that goes with software, right? You don't want friction in between different applications. They're rubbing up against each other, fighting each other for CPU or for fighting each other for memory space, whatever it happens to be. And you certainly don't want to generate friction with your customers, making it hard for them to get things done. Everything that you do should be as easy as possible for both sides, because the easier it is for support to help people, obviously the happier your support folks are going to be if they're not fighting amongst applications or fighting to find the right tool to use in a particular instance. Your customers will not be waiting too long. They'll be able to get assistance more easily, et cetera, et cetera. So you reduce friction on all counts. You make the effort lower on both ends, and therefore people get more productive and tend to be happier when they're working too if there's less friction, right? So that's an important point. Thanks for bringing it up, Peter. And that will bring us pretty much to the end of today's presentation. We're so glad that you came by. Please don't forget to rate this webinar. Those ratings are important to us. We look at them carefully to make sure that we're providing the best information we can, and we'd love to hear from your rating. Our next webinar will be in the third week of August. There's a little question on the date. It's scheduled currently for the 21st. It might shift a day or two. We're looking at that, and so watch this channel and others for announcements about when the next webinar will be, but it will be during that week. Thank you so much to Peter Zanoon, to our sponsor LogMeIn, and all of you for attending. This webcast is copyright 2018 by United Business Media, LLC. Presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted, if that is the case, HDI, which is solely responsible for its content, and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. And please remember that these are opinions. When Peter and I are talking, we're making educated calls as to what we think is the right solution or the right answer. So don't consider us to be the ultimate answerers. We just do our best to get the information to you. On behalf of HDI, thanks for your time and have a great day. And thanks again, Peter and LogMeIn.
Thanks, Roy.